And I will get going. All right. All right. Well, we're talking about respect for people. Is it a tool? Is it a pillar? Or is it a mindset? But I want to start out by asking you a question. What's the first word you think of when you see this picture? And you can just throw it in the chat. Let me pull up my chat here. It keeps disappearing every time I move rooms. But let me give you the picture, and then you can start throwing things in the chat. First word that comes to mind. I want you to just give me your kind of visceral gut instinct of what you're seeing when you, or thinking when you see that picture. Beer? Okay. In a hurry, yes. Lazy, avoidance, city worker, yeah, government job, hazard, error, lazy again, yeah. So lazy is often the predominant response that we see here. So let me tell you the story about this. It was my best friend. We've been friends since I was 8 years old. He gets on the job that morning. His boss tells him, "Hey, listen, Alan, I know you've been on the job for 10 years or so, but if you don't get your miles today, I got to let you go. I'm getting a lot of pressure from corporate. If you don't get your miles, I got to let you go." And Alan says, "Well, but Mike, it's hard to get my miles because the crew that's supposed to go out ahead of me doesn't always go out ahead of me when they're supposed to and do what they're supposed to do. And so I have to stop the rig and clear the road, and that's how I do it." And he says, "Yeah, I understand, but listen, if you don't get your miles, I'm told I got to let you go." He says, "Well, listen, I can't afford to lose my job. My wife was just diagnosed with a terminal illness. He's got 4 kids, 2 of them are in and out of the hospital. He says, I need this job." So now that you know the story behind the line, what's the first word that comes to mind when you look at that picture again? First word that comes to mind when you see that picture? Expedient, okay. Driven, desperate, creative solution, poor leadership. So here's what's interesting. There's a difference between what we first said, lazy, and now that's poor leadership. Now we're blaming. So first we blamed him because he was lazy. Now we're blaming the leader for being a poor leader. And see, here's the problem. The problem is our perspective. Most organizations only consider outcomes and their assessment of employee value and performance, and judging from our initial perspective on this situation. So do we at first blush, right? We have all painted the white line, and we've all judged the white line. So we've all gone to work and said, "What the heck is wrong with that guy?" But we've also had those days where we've painted the white line. The challenge with respect for people is you can't pick and choose when it's convenient. The challenge for all of us is to remember that all behavior is an expression of a need unmet. That means that everything that we do, good or bad, is in an effort to meet our own personal needs. And we're going to meet our own personal needs before we meet the needs of the organization. But in order to create the kind of culture we want at an organization, we need to change our mindset. We need to think about the white line in a different way. Rather than making judgments about another person and use that judgment as a fact to determine how we're going to interact or treat them, it's our duty to stop and catch ourselves as we make that judgment and remind ourselves that all behavior is an expression of a need unmet, and then ask the question, what is the unmet need here? So I think about value. We have this weird understanding about the value of people. But if you think about value, everything in the organization depreciates over time in value. The table, the desk that we're using, the computers that we're using, the equipment in our facilities, and just about any other object you can think of are all worth less than when we bought them. And they continue to go down in value as time moves on. However, there's one thing that consistently and reliably increases in value as time moves on, and that's our people. The longer someone is with the organization, the more knowledge they build up about how to best perform their responsibilities, the products and services we offer our customers, the customer needs, how to get things done in this particular environment, and generally how the business operates. The more knowledge, skills, and experience a person has, the more collective wisdom they acquire, which makes them more valuable to their team and to the organization. So with this concept established, why would we lay people off in the pursuit of cost cutting and efficiency? It doesn't really make sense. If we want to improve and grow, why would we remove the most valuable contributor the organization has to value creation? That just wouldn't make sense. The lean practice and the elements of continuous improvement doesn't strive to make processes more efficient so that the process might require fewer human resources. However, that does happen as we get more efficient. We may need less people, but instead of laying them off, now we have the opportunity to fully utilize them in other ways and use their time and attention in other ways. So it just doesn't make sense to lay people off. In fact, if we're doing lean well, then most likely the value of our equipment is going to be retained longer. And here's where a lot of companies make the mistake, though, that the CI efforts that we're making, they think that it's making people less valuable. When in fact, if we're applying the practice of lean and respect for people properly, we continue to value our people by investing in them as we free them up, growing our people and making them more valuable, as well as expanding their skills and knowledge and experience so they can contribute and grow their team's collective wisdom. So, and I often find this is a problem because we don't completely understand what lean is. And so I could go on for days about this, but I'm going to do this one kind of quickly. The first element of lean, which is a practice of, it's an ongoing process of challenging the current state in the pursuit of improvement, getting firsthand knowledge. And we're pretty well versed in continuous improvement. We're a little less versed in the other two elements. The second one is people. And this is where we're considering the full reliance of people, really relying on people and pushing decision-making to the point of value creation, because we're utilizing their unique experience and expertise and their judgments. And then the third element is the culture, with the kind of environment we're creating that promotes engagement and inspires people to autonomously create and deliver value. It's when all three of these things come together, it's the balance of these three things that give us the promise of that perfect value. And at the center, the linchpin in this is respect for people. Respect for people is what holds these three things together. Now, you can overdo it on continuous improvement. You could overdo it on the people side. You could overdo it on the culture side. And if you overdo it on any one of these, you're going to be out of balance. And so it's the balance of all of these things. It's the practice of engaging all of the stakeholders so that we can continuously improve to create and deliver value for each other, for all of the stakeholders in that pursuit of perfection. So with that, respect for people is at the center. One way to think about respect for people, one way to kind of think about how your organization is doing with respect for people is to ask the question. Answer this question, fill in the blanks. Our organization cares for what, even over what? Now, on the left side of this equation is usually profits, results, shipments, deliverables, customer, maybe productivity. On the other side is where we have people. So it usually fills in like this. Our organization cares for results even over people. Now, if you were to say that out loud in an organization, that would be almost blasphemy, right? And nobody would say that, because most organizations want to believe that they practice respect for people because they think it's about being nice to people. It's not about being nice to people. You should be nice to people because that's the right human thing to do. But respect for people is about how we're engaging people and how we're caring for people. And so the equation needs to flip. It needs to be our organization cares for people even over fill in the blank, deliverables, customer, productivity. And so in order to think about this, the challenge is how do we start those conversations? So I usually liken it to a continuum. If you think about respect for people on a continuum, on one side is value and care for the results. On the other side is value and care for people. And it might break out something like this. Here's some examples. Productivity focused versus clarity and consistency focused. Or leader goal driven versus stakeholder benefit driven. Or judging behaviors and results, kind of like the white line, versus learning from mistakes. Becoming a learning organization saying, okay, so hey, we made a mistake, but what did we learn from that? And looking at it as an opportunity rather than a problem. Command and control driven versus employee autonomy driven, which is pushing decision-making to that point of value creation, as close to the point of value creation as you can. And then coercive change versus people-driven change. And why do we care about this? Well, if we do a really good job at this, then we know that we'll create high levels of engagement. And we know that from the Gallup study, organizations that have high levels of engagement drive all the measures that we want to drive them down pretty significantly. And all the measures we want to drive up pretty significantly. So there's a lot of benefit to doing this. So is it a tool, a pillar, or a mindset? Well, a tool is, an implement used to carry out a particular function or objective. A pillar is a thing regarded as reliable, providing support for something. And a mindset is an established set of attitudes held by someone or a group. And so the question is, what is this? What is lean? Is it a tool, a pillar, or a mindset? So I'm going to open that first question up to the group here. What do you think?
Scott, it's all the above, I think. Right? I think there's aspects of this that are important in a variety of applications, and it's all of them, right?
Yeah. So it was a trick question, and you nailed it on the head. It's a little bit of all of them, right? It's a tool in the way that we create programming to deliver value to the people, to the stakeholders. But without a foundation of respect, the tool would really be ineffective. But in order to get to that foundation of respect, you really need to have a mindset shift in the way we see things and the way we think about things. So an example of this is I'll often ask my executives, what percentage of people come to work with the intention to do their best? And it's about 95% of them will respond something less than 100%. And the problem with that is if you see people as coming to do not their best, well, then you're going to treat them as if they're not doing their best. And if you treat them as if they're not doing their best, well, then guess what you get? You don't get their best. So we've got to shift the mindset so that we can create that foundation so that we can then engage in the tools to create respect for people. But it's about people valuing people, and how far on that continuum, how far down to the right side of that continuum can you get? All right, so with that question then, how do we build back leaner with respect for people? What would be some ideas that you might have? My email here in case you want to reach out to me.